Hey everyone, Greg Still here from Diverge Media. Going to do a quick recap video of the election. I'll save you a full live stream of it. So, for those who don't know, and I'll just wait a minute here until people get notified, but I was a scrutineer of the election last night. So, it was interesting. Basically, again, thanks for joining us, everyone. I was a scrutineer of the election last night and was at a pretty liberal riding and watching things going on. And I know it's been based. I'll just say, well, let's start by saying it was a pretty disappointing election, no matter who you support. If you're a liberal supporter, you were disappointed that you didn't get a liberal majority and basically got what was going, basically what you had, maybe gained a few seats. Um, if you're conservative, you're disappointed. This is loss number two. I would say on running on liberal light principles. Andrew Scheer did the same thing, dialed away from conservative principles. Aaron O'Toole doubled up on dialing away from conservative principles, and it showed in the polls where they even lost some seats out west. That has just never really been the case. And then I'm going to add Greens obviously had a dismal display. NDP's not happy with it. But then we get to the People's Party of Canada. Um, so I know there's a lot of talk about how things went. And I would hazard to say probably a lot of People's Party of Canada supporters are maybe happy with the turnout. I'm happy is the wrong word. They'll point to the fact that they went from about 1.5 to what is 5.1% in the vote right now, and say that that is cause for winning. I see that the People's Party of Canada posted that the People's Party of Canada is the new Green Party, but this is maybe going to be an unpopular take. But quite frankly, um, there's a bigger problem happening here in Canada than just winning seats or this or that. Um, but when it comes to the People's Party, they had a chance to have a voice in Ottawa, and they didn't come through. Um, yeah, there was a big uptick in percentage of votes, but ultimately, the goal is not to get a large percentage of the votes. The goal is to win seats. And so I think there's some reflection needed here from the People's Party of Canada brass on exactly what needs to be done going forward. So there's a few things that I'm going to inform you about. Maybe you know as a People's Party of Canada supporter, maybe you don't. But the party does not have a party constitution. Um, Maxime Bernier, this is the second time in two elections that he's lost his own seat, his own riding. Now, I'm not saying that the People's Party of Canada supporters or members would re-elect or would elect another leader to be leader. But unfortunately, I think the conversation needs to be had that this is the second loss in a row. No seats have been won again. And there's areas that maybe should have been focused on a little bit more with certain candidates that maybe could have pulled it out. But at the end of the day, you needed at least one seat in Parliament to have a voice, and you don't have it. So I'm just going to say, I don't think this is a victory for the People's Party of Canada. Um, I think it's quite a big loss, actually. I think there was maybe a bit too much concentration on focusing in on the lockdown portions of the election without focusing in on if that wasn't a wedge issue for someone, you're not going to gain their vote. And there was lots of people it was a wedge issue for, and they did gain a lot of votes, not just from conservatives. There's some common misconception. And no, I'll add in that no, the People's Party of Canada didn't split the vote and cause the conservatives to lose the election. Guess what? They sucked all on their own. They would have lost either way. Now, mind you, they did cause, likely in some ridings, for the Conservatives to lose their seat to someone else, but they didn't cause enough to actually make a difference this election. We have a Liberal government now that has the smallest minority. This is Andrew Coyne that put this out. The smallest minority of any government that's ever won an election. The smallest percentage of the popular vote, rather. So Trudeau, to Trudeau fashion, found a way to spend $600 million and essentially accomplish nothing. But now I'm going to address something else. There's lots of people talking about the vote being stolen, and at the end of the day, as a scrutineer, I was at the election. I don't see it. The reality is, it would honestly be more convenient if that was the truth. It would be more convenient if the election was stolen, because at least you know what the issue was and you could solve it. But the truth of the matter is, I believe this election was a symptom of something bigger. It's a symptom of the fear within Canadian culture, and it's a symptom of the lack of understanding of big picture politics, big picture economics from the Canadian populace. This is a cultural issue. It would be convenient if it was something else, but the reality is, everyone, it's not. There's a big battle on the front here for culture, for education, because the reality is, we just voted for a party that, or well, Canada as a whole just voted for a party that's going to implement a vaccine passport, that's going to divide Canadians further, that's going to spend more money that we don't have, made a bunch of promises. Like, we're already broke. This debt is leading to inflation, and people haven't made that connection as Canadians. That's what that tells me. This is a much bigger issue than just, you know, this election. This is a cultural issue. Canadians don't understand basic economics. Canadians don't understand why things keep getting more expensive. And that's where the battlefront's going to have to be had. But all in all, I think it's been a disappointing election for every single party involved. Um, and as somebody, again, I was scrutineering uh, in my hometown here of Kitchener. Witnessed firsthand some things maybe that were questionable, but there was nothing, again, nothing that was over the top and that would sway an entire election. It's just not going to happen. And especially, again, it would be a convenient thing to believe, but it's far from the truth. The truth of the matter is, Canadians don't understand what is at stake. They don't understand what they just potentially voted for. When by that, I mean, they think they know, but when you lead more or spend more debt, it leads to more inflation, which makes life harder. Housing crisis tied into a lot of different things. It's not just hand money, and that which is the solution of many governments here. But yeah, all in all, I scrutineered. It was a late night. I didn't get out of the polls till about 12:30. They're going to finish up counting today, I believe, of mail-in ballots. But to take aim here again, I think the People's Party of Canada, specifically, there's going to be a lot of people that think this was a great thing for them, and I think that needs to be reflected on. There should have been seats won. There was no seats won, and now you have no voice in Ottawa. So again, yes, you went from 1.5 to 5, but the question needs to be asked: why couldn't they capitalize in any single one area enough to win a seat? Now that voice that is against lockdowns and restrictions is not in Ottawa. And so the question needs to be asked from the PPC supporters. This is the second election in a row Maxime has lost. Maybe he should have spent more time focusing on both. Maybe he should have parachuted himself in to a different riding altogether, where he was more confident that he could win an actual seat. Because at the end of the day, yes, you have 5% of the vote, but you still don't have a voice in Ottawa. So lots of things to reflect on. Again, I don't even know that they could have a referendum for whether or not Maxime should be a leader of the People's Party. Again, I don't know that they wouldn't elect him again. They likely would. I'm not sure who else would step up, but they don't have a party constitution. I've talked to Insider Brass about this before. They didn't much like what I had to say, because quite frankly, it's been 2.5 years, and there's no excuse to not having that done. So now I'll give some leniency here. The election's done. Let's see if the next 3 to 6 months you finish out the party constitution and ensure that there's voting processes for the members to have a say within the internal policies that are going on. Now, lots of great People's Party candidates. But I will also say, one of the pet peeves I had, there's lots of great candidates, but there was a lot of candidates that probably shouldn't have been candidates. And a lot of people are going to take this personally, but there was people that didn't seem to have been vetted in depth. We'll just leave it at that. I don't doubt that they were vetted, but I don't think there was in-depth vetting going on. I think they were more concerned about getting as many candidates as they could in as many ridings to have the ability for people to have a chance to vote for the People's Party. But the reality is, you need to make sure that every candidate that goes in that represents you, because they're an ambassador of your brand, you need to make sure every candidate it's not that you have to have a squeaky clean past, but you need to be able to carry yourself in a way, communicate your ideas respectfully and in a way that's going to resonate with voters. And there's many people that got involved potentially for the wrong reasons that weren't able to do those things successfully, and it makes it harder to break through and win seats when the brand is associated with maybe some people that shouldn't have been there. I will leave it at that. There's articles you can check out on different things. I don't need to go into much detail. But again, liberals really aren't happy probably with the turnout of this election. They won another minority, spent $600 million to do it. They really divided Canadians during the whole campaign, and then now they're going to try to talk unity. It's like, give me a break. Conservatives, Aaron O'Toole, you need to step down. I'll be surprised if he doesn't, quite frankly, but I wouldn't be surprised if they try to keep him in for another election in 18 months ish, because that's what Trudeau said he was looking at. So Aaron O'Toole had a really weak showing. And this is what happens when you don't run on conservative principles. You try to appease the left and you didn't win anybody on the left anyways. You just lost people on the right. And there was a lot of conservative voters, especially out west, that were registered voters that for the Conservative Party that just did not go out and vote. NDP, certain ridings did pretty well. My riding, they seemed to do pretty well. Didn't pull it off, I don't believe. I think you're right there, Tina. They had a negative image of anti-vax mask, and people had a hard time seeing past that. And so this is something that maybe needs to be talked about. And I think what I was reflecting on last night is that it's okay to focus in on a wedge issue that you think is going to be popular. And it was, and it is an important, very important being against lockdowns and restrictions and pro freedom, pro choice are very important fundamental things. But it's not enough to win an election on. It's not enough to win seats on. People needed to see past just being upset about lockdowns and restrictions, and they weren't offered that in what was campaigned on by any of the candidates, really. There's lots of things that I think conservative voters, NDP voters, liberal voters, Green voters could have agreed on in the People's Party of Canada platform that really weren't discussed on the campaign trail. Now, I know it's a short campaign, but if you got 15 minutes, maybe you'll leave 5 minutes aside to talk about those things that you think can pull people in. I'm talking economic policies. I'm talking immigration tying to housing and how we can't really catch up on our lack of supply for housing if we're continuing to bring in 350,000 immigrants a year and settling 40% of them into the GTA. So there's lots of things that could have been talked about and tied in that would paint a bigger picture for people rather than just the lockdown issue. And I don't think that was done successfully. In closing, the polls, there's let's see if there's a few things I can address that I've seen online. The big lineups, that's a result of the COVID policies, I believe, that were put in place. At least that's what I witnessed personally, as a result of only letting so many people inside the building. So instead of lining up inside as traditionally would be done, you'd stand in line behind people and twirl around to as many turns and twists as you needed to stay in line. Instead of doing that, they were having people line up outside. I've seen pictures and videos coming out of Mississauga. Another issue that came up that I think is worth talking about is, again, it could have been affected in some ridings. But basically, the training that went around Elections Canada, if you had a bunch of inexperienced people running the polls, it could have played out differently. Now, I've heard different explanations, and I'll give you them. Basically, normally what happens for Elections Canada training is that you'd have 27 hours, was what I was told, of training on what the procedures are, what you do, and all the different things and intricacies of running an election. Now, for this election, they say there's different excuses given. Basically, it's a short election, so and COVID, and so they condensed it down to 9 hours. But I was talking with poll workers that had only received 3 hours. Now, in the case of my poll, there was lots of experienced people, so that I didn't see that bleeding through to issues with the electoral process really in any way. There was a few people that maybe, unprofessional would become the word that would come to mind. So I was scrutineering, and they found out who I was scrutineering for and basically made very unprofessional comments. One pollster said, well, I said, hey, I'm here for a copy of the poll results. They said, well, and what's your party? I said, this is the party. They said, okay. Well, I can't find it right now, but I can tell you the numbers suck. So stuff like this kind of, it doesn't bode well. It made me kind of question who's doing the screening process for this such an integral part of democracy, because there's a few people in there that clearly the bias was worn on their sleeve. And I mean, I didn't see anything. I was walking table to table, but it didn't sit well with me nonetheless. You need to be professional. But going forward, I think there needs to be a real gut check here of what to do next. Um, maybe this is a blessing in disguise that Trudeau couldn't pull off a couldn't pull off a majority, couldn't, but he got basically the same thing. Maybe this will be what does him in, is that people say, well, why did we waste all this time and money? Why did you put people's lives at risk? If that's the narrative that they've bought into on COVID, is that everybody's at dire risk. But why did you put everybody's lives at risk so you could get the exact same result? Maybe this will be something that churns and wakes people up. But the reality is there was an abysmal turnout at the polls. I think we're at 61%. We're waiting for mail-ins, but it was an abysmal turnout at the polls. And so really the question is, listen, guys, it doesn't matter the party, liberal, conservative, NDP, Green, PPC, you didn't do anything. You didn't provide a platform and a vision for Canadians that could be bought into. Now, there's some people that will probably never vote, but the reality is the vote didn't get out if they wanted to get out, or they just didn't want to get out. When we're at less than 61 or 62% of Canadians getting out to the polls, it really means like not, people don't normally, they say they vote people out, but I believe people vote for something they believe in as much as they vote for people out. And at the end of the day, Canadians didn't en masse get out to the polls in the way that was expected. And I think uh, from being privy to insider conversations, a lot of people within specifically the People's Party thought there would be a lot of people that would come out to the polls that were unregistered voters that had never done it. And those were the people that were going to be unaccounted for that would come out. And the reality is they didn't turn out. And so I believe in extreme ownership. So any of these parties, if you're liberals, you need to go, why didn't we win a majority? Why couldn't we win a majority? What was it about our platform that couldn't win us a majority? Why were we in the exact same places we basically were before? If you're the conservatives, you need to go, why did we lose votes in the West and not really gain? We didn't gain anything in the East. So is it time to maybe have a gut check there? NDP, Anime Paul, is probably going to be ousted as leader, lost their own riding, and there's lots of internal turmoil there. I think it's unfortunate, but that's a tough situation for them. NDP not happy. They didn't really churn up anything else, so they need to have a gut check moment about why that is. Why couldn't they get Canadians out? And then when it's the People's Party of Canada, yes, you went from 1.5% to 5.1%, but I'm sorry, there's nothing to celebrate about. Yes, like there's some to be. It's not that it's not anything to be proud about. Yes, you went from 1.5 to 5.1, but at the end of the day, the goal is to get elected, and it didn't happen. And so the gut check needs to happen here as to why is that the case. And this is for all the parties, but why couldn't we get out the vote? Why couldn't we get the desired result? And so specifically on the People's Party, the question is, what is it that resonated? What is it that didn't? And I think Tina said it earlier, but I don't think a lot of people could get past the perception or image of the anti-vaccine lockdown type image. And part of what could have been done is talking about the many other policies that would be beneficial for Canada from the platform as well, and have that as a side note. People already know it's there. You didn't need to hit it perhaps every time with everything. And so, and then there's the question of, again, party constitution and a potential vote on a leader when it comes to the People's Party of Canada. I'm not saying that the members would want it, but this is 2 elections in a row. Maxime has lost them both. So the question needs to be asked. I think the members deserve to have that voice within the party, and we'll see what happens here in the next 3-6 months. I'll be watching that closely, but ultimately I think this is probably one of the most, at least I have a short-lived experience that I've only been able to vote in 2 federal elections, but this is probably the most disappointing election in recent Canadian history, maybe in all of Canadian history. I mean, we went out, people were angry about even having to go out, and Trudeau has nothing to show for it. Conservatives have nothing to show for it. NDP, Greens, PPC, nobody has anything to show for it other than basically what was already there, and lots of money out the door. And if that isn't a metaphor for the Liberal government, or for Trudeau's legacy. I don't know what it is. He spent $600 million. Nobody wanted it, and he has nothing to show for it. If that isn't a metaphor for the Liberal legacy, I don't know what is. But anyways, that's my thoughts on the election. Again, I know lots to talk about. Vote splitting, I already addressed that. Lots to talk about. Steal the vote. I don't see that. I'm sorry. It would be convenient if that was the argument, but there's a culture issue here in Canada. There's an education issue where people don't understand how these things work together and affect them. And there's an image issue that comes with these ideas that needs to be overcome. People need to be able to have collegial conversation again with people on the opposite side of the aisle that they don't agree with. In fact, it's more than ever been needed. I was talking with liberal scrutineers all night. I had good conversations with a few of them. Few of them rubbed me the wrong way. But at the end of the day, we had collegial conversation. They got to know me a little bit. Hopefully it made them maybe rethink the way they think about things. But at the end of the day, we're all Canadians living under one banner, Canada. We're Canadian, and we need to figure out how to get along. We need to figure out how to talk to each other about these issues. And I know politicians aren't helping. They're gaslighting, dividing the public, but politics is upstream from culture. It stems from us. We are divided. We are at each other's throats. We aren't talking to each other anymore. We're talking at each other, if we're even doing that at all. And so it is something that really needs to be thought about. And you need to take the time, step back, and remove yourself from the tribal paradigm for a little bit. Because I don't give a damn. Just be blunt here. I don't give a damn about what the tribe says, what the group think is. I care about results. And if we're not getting results, it's plan, do, check, adjust. You do a plan, you do it, and then you check how'd it go. Guess what? Not good. Now it's time to adjust. This is what leaders do. It's time to go ahead with the battle of ideas, so to speak, and we need to figure out how we influence Canadians on big issues, how we have these hard conversations about not no none of these things are black and white. So many nuanced conversations. I'm sure I have a lot more in common with a liberal on the environment than they think I do, but they don't think we have anything in common, and that's the issue. They see us as them and we're us, and this is the type of thing that is dividing Canada, and it needs to stop now. I'm Greg Staley from Diverge Media. Thanks for popping in for my quick recap. I'm going to be going back to work here shortly. I'm going back to work next Monday. I can't afford to do this anymore. I've put aside as much money as I could, chase this, with everything I had, and I thank you for all the support I've gotten. Um, I'm proud of what I've done. I really am, but I'm not done yet. So don't get it mistaken. Yes, I have to go back to work to provide for my family. I'm going to be working full time, but I will make sure Diverge Media doesn't just go on live support. We will continue bringing you great footage, great articles. You maybe can expect more things like this, of just quick videos that aren't as prim and proper, so to speak. I want to bring, part of what has always bothered me is it's tough to be professional and at the same time show you a little bit about who I am. And I'm going to try to, I'm not going to have as much time to always do the professional side of things. So I hope this is okay, where I can be a little bit more personal and a little bit more off the cuff and tell you a little bit more how I feel, and don't hold it against me. But I hope these videos can spark hard conversation. Share this around, use it to spark a hard conversation. The reality is, I really care about the ideas that I've constantly talk about on my show. I care about freedom, liberty, uh, getting the debt down so that inflation isn't out of control, basic fiscal responsibility. And we need to find the way to get these conversations in the public discourse. And it doesn't happen by being divided, by staying in our tribes and yelling at each other. So everyone, again, thank you so much for, if you've been following us all this time, that's amazing. But we're not going anywhere, but it is going to potentially slow down for a little bit as I figure out the new schedule. If you want to help, divergemedia.ca. We have merch. We take donations. But yeah, look for a little bit of a step back here after the election as I head back to work full time. And but we're not going anywhere. It's only just begun. And I really do believe the next year to 2 years with Diverge Media, I really believe we're going to become a major independent player here. When it comes to media, I've done so much wrong when I started this out. and I'm learning through pain and suffering of what not to do. And a lot of business is learning what not to do. So I think we're going to get better. Uh, and I really appreciate everybody who's been here from the beginning. But thank you. Let's decompress after this election. Hug your loved ones. Get out, talk to your neighbors. Be kind to one another, and let's have these conversations from a place of compassion, love, and kindness, because that's the only way this world's going to change. Thank you, everyone. Greg Stilly from Diverge Media, and I'll see you next time.